Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. This is Runner Stories for the Road, and we're part of the MD Talk Health and Fitness channel.
Great to be here.
Today, we're really getting into it. We're going to explore the early life, the really formative years of Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, starting right from the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like a documentary, step by step. From his birth in Porbandar.
Yeah.
Right through to, well, how he became this key figure in India's freedom movement.
Against British rule, yeah. It's a huge story.
It is. And we're drawing on some detailed accounts, trying to understand the key moments, the influences that really made him who he was.
So let's set the scene. We're talking Porbandar, coastal town, October 1869. Yeah. That's where Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born, into a very devout Hindu family.
And his parents were quite influential, I understand.
Very much so. His mother, Putlabai, she was deeply spiritual, really instilled values like compassion, fasting, prayer, things that stayed with him.
Right.
And his father, Karamchand Gandhi, he wasn't just anybody. He was the chief minister there in Porbandar.
So a background of both spirituality and, well, politics in a way.
Definitely. And those early values, they took root quite deeply.
I read that stories were really important to him as a child, particularly one about a king.
Oh, absolutely. The story of King Harishchandra, it's all about this king's incredible commitment to truth, no matter what.
And that resonated with young Mohandas.
Deeply. It wasn't just a story. It seems to have planted this seed about the absolute necessity of truth. It became a core principle later on.
Like foundational for his whole philosophy.
Pretty much. You can trace Satyagraha, his truth force, right back to these early influences. Like Harishchandra, it was about making truth non-negotiable.
Interesting. And then quite young, he got married, 13.
Yes, 13, to Kasturba. And by all accounts, it was, more of a traditional arrangement or ritual than some kind of teenage romance.
Hard to imagine at that age.
Right. Likely lots of confusion, maybe possessiveness. They were just kids, really.
But that relationship lasted a lifetime, didn't it?
It did. It evolved hugely. Lots of struggle, definitely, but also deep love and eventually a shared path, shared ideals. It's quite a journey in itself.
There's another powerful story from his youth about stealing gold.
Ah, yes. The confession. He stole a bit of gold from a relative, felt incredibly guilty, and decided he had to confess to his father.
And he expected anger, I suppose.
He must have. But his father didn't shout. He read the confession and he just wept, silent tears.
Wow.
And for Gandhi, that was profound. It wasn't punishment, it was pain, it was sorrow. He said it was his first real lesson in ahimsa, in a way, but also in atonement. The power of truth, the relief of confession, but also seeing the hurt caused.
That's, much more powerful than being yelled at.
Exactly. It stuck with him, that image of his father's tears.
But then there's a much darker memory associated with his father's death.
Yes, a very difficult time. His father was dying, and, well, Gandhi was with Kasturba at the moment his father actually passed away. He felt he'd failed in his duty, succumbing to, as he put it, carnal desire, when he should have been by his father's side.
That must have left a terrible scar.
He said it did. A deep sense of shame and guilt that never really left him. It fused grief with this personal failing and really strengthened his resolve for self-control later in life. It was a heavy burden.
So fast forward a bit, 1888, he decides to go to London to study law.
He does. But it wasn't straightforward. Going overseas was a big deal, culturally and religiously. His caste community actually effectively ostracized him for the decision, declared him an outcast.
Really? Just for traveling abroad?
In that specific context, yes. It was a major transgression for his particular community at the time, but he was determined, and his mother made him take these vows before he left.
Yes, the vows. No meat.
No meat, no alcohol, and no women. He promised her. So he sets off for England, exiled by his caste, but armed with these promises. Quite the start to his journey.
London must have been a culture shock.
Oh.
And keeping that vegetarian vow.
Definitely challenging. The food was familiar, the climate was cold. But he found his footing, partly by discovering the Vegetarian Society.
Ah, like-minded people.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about finding food. He got involved. He started reading about the ethics of vegetarianism, not just the religious aspect. He even started speaking publicly, editing their journal.
So it was a first taste of activism, in a way.
You could say that. It broadened his horizons beyond just law. It was about principles, about advocating for a belief.
But he did become a barrister, right? He finished his studies.
He did, got the robe and everything. But putting it into practice back in India, that was another story.
What happened?
Crippling stage fright. Just couldn't speak in court. His very first case, apparently he just stood there tongue-tied and had to give it up. Humiliating, I imagine.
Oh, wow. So the whole lawyer thing wasn't quite working out.
Not initially. He started doubting if it was the right path. It felt distant from his inner moral journey, perhaps.
And then he returns to India, facing more difficulties.
Yes, a tough return.
Yeah.
He arrives back home only to learn his mother had passed away while he was gone. They'd kept the news from him.
Well, that's heartbreaking.
Terrible. And professionally, things didn't improve much. He was back in Bombay, a qualified barrister, but with no confidence, no cases. He couldn't even bring himself to cross-examine witnesses effectively, just adrift.
It sounds like he was really searching for direction.
He absolutely was, which makes what happened next in South Africa even more significant.
Right, the famous train incident, Pietermaritzburg Station.
That's the one. He had a first-class ticket, but he was told to move to the third-class carriage because he wasn't white.
And he refused.
He refused. He had a valid ticket, so they threw him off the train, physically removed him, and left him shivering on the platform all night.
Just blatant racism.
Absolutely blatant. And that experience, that humiliation, that cold night on the platform, that's where something fundamentally shifted. He resolved right then and there to fight this injustice. Not just for himself, but for all Indians facing this prejudice. It was a spark.
The seed of resistance, as they say.
Precisely. No more passive acceptance. From that point on, we see a different Gandhi emerging in South Africa.
How did that start? With his legal work.
Yes, he started taking cases. He won a significant case for an Indian businessman against a British firm. That earned him respect. But more importantly, it deepened his understanding of just how systemic the discrimination was.
It wasn't just isolated incidents.
Not at all. It was pervasive, humiliating. Indians were treated as less than human, and seeing this day in, day out spurred him to organize.
Which led to the Natal Indian Congress in 1894.
Exactly. He realized individual legal battles weren't enough. They needed a collective voice, an organization to fight for their rights, to petition, to protest discriminatory laws. The Natal Indian Congress was that platform. It was a major step.
But this kind of activism, challenging the status quo, it must have provoked a reaction.
It certainly did. In Durban, he was actually attacked by a white mob. They were furious about his work, about him challenging their dominance. He was beaten quite badly.
How did he respond to that violence?
This is really telling. He refused to press charges against his attackers. He chose forgiveness, even then. It's an early glimpse of that principle of nonviolence, of ahimsa, in action, even when personally assaulted.
That takes incredible strength.
It really does, and his work continued. In 1904, he established the Phoenix Settlement.
Tell us about that. What was the idea behind it?
Phoenix was like a living experiment in his ideals. A community based on simple living, shared labor, self-sufficiency, very influenced by writers like Ruskin.
Like putting his philosophy into practice.
Exactly. And crucially, it was also where he started his newspaper, Indian Opinion. He understood the power of the press to awaken consciousness, to unite people, to drive the movement forward.
So community building and communication, hand in hand.
Yes. And then, interestingly, during times of war, he actually volunteered his services.
During the Boer War and the Zulu Rebellion. That seems unexpected, given the discrimination he faced.
It does, looking back. His thinking at the time, particularly during the Boer War, was that by serving the empire, by showing loyalty as stretcher bearers, Indians could perhaps earn more rights, prove their worth.
Did it work?
Not really. The underlying discrimination didn't change much, but the experience, especially during the Zulu Rebellion, exposed him directly to the brutality of colonial violence. Witnessing that suffering, it left a deep mark. It probably pushed him further towards nonviolent solutions.
Which brings us to 1906 and a really key moment, the birth of Satyagraha.
Yes, Johannesburg. A packed theater. The government had introduced a humiliating registration law for Indians. Gandhi stood up and proposed something radically new.
Satyagraha, truth force.
Exactly. He coined the term. It wasn't passive resistance. It was active but nonviolent, rooted in truth, in moral courage. No violence, but absolutely no surrender to injustice. Civil disobedience with spiritual strength.
A whole new philosophy of resistance.
Completely. And it became the bedrock of everything he did afterwards.
And he continued building communities based on these ideas. Tolstoy Farm.
Yes, in 1910, Tolstoy Farm.
Yeah.
Even more focused on self-sufficiency, communal living, discipline. Inspired by Tolstoy, Ruskin again, it was a place to train satyagrahis, people committed to this path.
And he himself was changing, adopting simpler dress.
Profoundly. This is where he really embraces that simplicity. Simple clothes, spinning his own cloth with the charkha. It was all part of this quest for self-purification, living the ideals he preached.
These weren't just political tactics, they were deeply personal disciplines.
Absolutely intertwined.
Yeah.
And these principles were put to the test in 1913.
The Big March.
The Great March. He led about 2,000 Indian workers, men and women, marching against unfair taxes and marriage laws that invalidated non-Christian unions.
How did the authorities react?
With repression, arrests, including women protesters, Gandhi himself jailed multiple times, but the marchers remained largely nonviolent.
And the outcome?
The sheer scale of it, the moral pressure, the outcry both locally and internationally, it worked. The government eventually had to back down, negotiate, and repeal some of the worst laws. It was a major victory for Satyagraha in South Africa.
So after all this, over 20 years of struggle and transformation in South Africa, he finally returns to India.
January 9th, 1915. He arrives in Bombay. And the reception is huge. Garlands, applause. He's already seen as a leader, a Mahatma even by some.
But he didn't just jump into politics?
No, that's what's fascinating. He arrives as the celebrated figure, but his first instinct is humility. He basically says, hold on, I need to understand India first. I must know India before I can serve her.
Wise words.
Very. And he had guidance in this. He connected with Gopal Krishna Gokhale.
Major nationalist leader at the time.
Very respected, moderate leader. Gokhale became his political mentor in a way. And his advice was crucial.
What did Gokhale tell him?
Essentially, travel, observe, listen, don't speak out, don't take positions until you truly understand the country. Speak only when your soul is ready.
And Gandhi followed that advice.
To the letter. He spent the next year, more or less, traveling across India.
How did he travel? First class this time?
No, deliberately not. Third-class trains. That was key. He wanted to see India as the majority experienced it.
So living amongst ordinary people.
Exactly. Eating with laborers, sleeping on station floors sometimes. He saw the grinding poverty, the terrible sanitation issues, the cruelty of the caste system up close.
It must have been eye-opening even for him.
Profoundly. He realized India wasn't just colonized by the British, it was deeply fractured within itself. These weren't abstract problems, they were lived realities he was witnessing.
And after this year of observation, he establishes the Sabarmati Ashram.
Yes, near Ahmedabad in 1915, this became his base, his spiritual laboratory, if you like.
What were the rules there? What was life like?
It was built on vows, truth, nonviolence, ahimsa, celibacy, brahmacharya, non-possession, asteya, control of the palate, fearlessness, equality of religions, swadeshji, use of local goods, and crucially, abolition of untouchability. Everyone shared in the labor.
Even tasks considered unclean.
Especially those. Gandhi himself made a point of cleaning the latrines, directly challenging the caste hierarchy. The ashram was meant to be a microcosm of the India he envisioned, self-reliant, equitable, truthful. It became the nerve center.
And from this base, he starts getting involved in specific struggles. Champaran in 1917.
That was his first major Satyagraha campaign in India. It started with a farmer, Rajkumar Shukla, who basically wouldn't leave Gandhi alone until he agreed to come and see the plight of the indigo sharecroppers in Champaran, Bihar.
What was the issue there?
Oppressive contracts forced on them by British landlords, compelling them to grow indigo on the best parts of their land for very little return. It was deeply exploitative.
And Gandhi went.
He went. The British authorities immediately ordered him to leave. He refused, defied the order. That was the start of the civil disobedience there.
It worked.
It did. His defiance, his detailed investigation into the farmers' grievances, the support he garnered, it forced the government to set up an official inquiry committee with Gandhi on it. And ultimately, the exploitative system was abolished. A huge victory.
Wow. First major campaign, major success.
It really established his methods in India, and it was quickly followed by another one in Kedah, Gujarat in 1918.
What was the situation in Kedah?
Famine. Crop failure. Yet, the British were insisting on collecting the full land tax from the struggling farmers.
So Gandhi organized them.
He did, along with leaders like Vallabhbhai Patel, who became a key figure alongside him. They organized the farmers to peacefully refuse to pay the tax, nonviolent non-cooperation.
And again.
Again, after a sustained struggle, the government had to compromise and suspend the tax for the year for most farmers. It showed the power of unity and peaceful defiance.
And there was also the Ahmedabad mill strike around the same time?
Yes, also 1918, workers were striking for higher wages. Gandhi got involved, but his method was unique.
How so?
He went on a fast. But he clarified it wasn't to pressure the mill owners directly, it was to strengthen the resolve of the striking workers and to appeal to the conscience of both sides, to purify the struggle.
A moral weapon.
Precisely. And after a few days, with the moral pressure mounting, a settlement was reached. It established fasting as another key element in his Satyagraha toolkit.
During this time, he's also working on Hindu-Muslim unity.
Constantly. He saw it as absolutely essential for India's future. He was always reaching out, building bridges, emphasizing common ground in the struggle against the British.
And it's around now that Tagore calls him Mahatma.
Yes. Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet and Nobel laureate, was deeply impressed by Gandhi's spiritual aura and his commitment to the people. He bestowed the title Mahatma Great Soul.
How did Gandhi feel about that?
He was apparently quite uncomfortable with it, resisted being put on a pedestal, but the name stuck, didn't it? It captured how millions were starting to see him.
Now, there's a slightly controversial point around 1918. His support for recruiting Indians into the British Army for World War I.
Yes, that's often raised. His reasoning, it seems, was based on a belief perhaps misplaced, that demonstrating loyalty and contributing to the war effort would strengthen India's case for self-government, for Swaraj after the war. Kind of, if we help them now, they'll grant us more rights later.
Did many Indians enlist based on his call?
Not a huge number, actually. And crucially, after the war, Britain offered very little in return. Instead of concessions, India got repression.
Like the Rowlatt Act in 1919.
Exactly. That was a slap in the face. After all the wartime sacrifices, the British brought in these laws, allowing detention without trial, clamping down on civil liberties.
How did Gandhi react?
With outrage. He saw it as a betrayal. He called for a nationwide hardle, a day of shutdown, fasting, prayer, and peaceful protest.
And did the country respond?
Massively. It was the first truly nationwide mobilization he'd called for on that scale. India came to a standstill. It showed the depth of anger and his growing influence.
But this period of protest led to one of the darkest days, Jallianwala Bagh.
April 13th, 1919. Amritsar. A date burned into India's memory. A large, peaceful crowd, including women and children, had gathered in an enclosed space, Jallianwala Bagh, protesting the Rowlatt Act and recent arrests.
Unarmed.
Completely unarmed. General Dyer arrived with his troops, blocked the only main exit, and ordered his soldiers to open fire. Without warning.
Firing into the crowd.
Relentlessly. Firing until their ammunition was almost exhausted. Hundreds were killed, maybe over 1,000. Thousands more wounded. It was a cold-blooded massacre.
The impact must have been devastating.
It shattered any remaining faith Gandhi and countless others had in British justice or goodwill. It was a point of no return. Any hope of partnership within the empire died that day.
So this directly led to the demand shifting, from reforms to full self-rule.
Absolutely. After Jallianwala Bagh, the call became clear, unequivocal, Swaraj, complete independence, no more petitions, no more gradual reforms. The time for demanding full self-rule had arrived.
The age of resistance begins.
Yes, and Gandhi now starts preparing the nation for its first massive nationwide campaign based on this demand, the non-cooperation movement.
What did that involve? What was the strategy?
It was about withdrawing all cooperation from the British Raj, boycotting everything, government schools, courts, administrative posts, refusing to buy British goods, giving up titles. It was meant to paralyze the administration, but peacefully.
Not just protest, but purification too, you said.
Yes, that was key for Gandhi. It was about Indians reclaiming their self-respect, their economic independence through Swadeshi and Khadi, and their moral strength, a soul force rebellion.
And he connects this with the Khilafat movement.
He does. This was a movement among Indian Muslims concerned about the fate of the Ottoman Caliphate after World War I. Gandhi saw supporting Khilafat as a vital way to build Hindu-Muslim unity for the larger cause of Swaraj. He tied the two movements together.
A strategic alliance.
Very much so. And then, at the Congress session in Nagpur in late 1920, the non-cooperation movement is officially launched.
What did that look like on the ground?
It was huge. Students left British schools and colleges, lawyers gave up their practices, people resigned from government jobs, and the Swadeshi movement really took off.
Bonfires of foreign cloth.
Yes, massive bonfires across the country. People enthusiastically took up spinning khadi on the charkha. It became a symbol of defiance and self-reliance.
And Gandhi himself, how did he connect with people during this massive movement?
He traveled tirelessly, again, mostly by third-class train, speaking to huge crowds, often in local languages. He wasn't some distant leader. He was Bapu, father connecting with the heart of the nation, his simple living, his deep empathy, it created this incredible bond.
And people followed his example in renouncing titles.
Yes. Tagore famously returned his knighthood after Jallianwala Bagh. Gandhi gave back his Kaiser-i-Hind medal. Thousands of others returned medals and honors. It was a powerful rejection of the colonial system.
How did the British react to all this? They must have been worried.
Deeply worried. The Viceroy's government was monitoring him constantly, debating whether arresting him would quell the movement or just make him a martyr and spark more unrest. They were walking a tightrope.
Did they try to undermine the movement?
They did. Propaganda, arrests of local leaders. And they tried symbolic gestures, like organizing a visit by the Prince of Wales in 1921.
How'd that go?
It was largely boycotted. When the prince arrived in Bombay, the streets were deserted. A huge embarrassment for the Raj and a sign of the movement's strength.
But with such a massive movement, maintaining nonviolence must have been a constant challenge.
A huge challenge. Gandhi constantly preached restraint, warned against violence. He knew that any violence would give the British the excuse they needed to crush the movement. He kept saying freedom wasn't worth shedding innocent blood.
And then Chauri Chaura happened, February 1922.
Yes, the tragic turning point. In a village called Chauri Chaura in Uttar Pradesh, a clash between protesters and police turned violent. The protesters, enraged, attacked the police station and set it on fire.
And police officers died.
22 policemen died in the fire. It was exactly the kind of violence Gandhi had feared and warned against.
His reaction?
He was devastated, absolutely heartbroken. He felt the movement had strayed from its core principle of nonviolence, that the people weren't ready.
So what did he do?
He did something that shocked almost everyone. He called off the entire non-cooperation movement, halted it completely, nationwide.
Just like that, when it seemed to be gaining so much ground.
Just like that. He undertook a 5-day fast as penance. Many leaders in Congress were furious, argued it was a mistake, a retreat. But Gandhi was adamant. For him, the means nonviolence were inseparable from the end. If the means became corrupted, the entire struggle was compromised.
A decision based purely on principle, even if politically difficult.
Absolutely. It showed his unwavering commitment to satyagraha, to truth and nonviolence above all else, even above immediate political advantage.
Wow. So that brings us to the end of this first major phase, really. From his birth through South Africa, his return, and the rise and sudden suspension of non-cooperation. It's quite a journey already.
It truly is. You see all the core elements forming. His deep spirituality, the influence of his family, the shock of injustice in South Africa, the development of satyagraha, his connection with the masses, and this absolute unshakable commitment to nonviolence.
It really lays the groundwork for everything that followed, doesn't it? His leadership wasn't accidental. It was forged through these intense experiences and principled stands.
Precisely. These early years are crucial to understanding the man who would eventually lead India to freedom. The foundations were built through struggle, reflection, and immense personal discipline.
It's been fascinating tracing that path. Thank you for taking us through it in such detail. Really helps to see how those early experiences shaped the Mahatma.
My pleasure. It's a story that always offers new insights, I think. His commitment, his methods, they still provoke thought today.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd leave with our listeners about this period of Gandhi's life?
Maybe just the power of conviction. Gandhi's journey shows how deeply held personal beliefs, when acted upon with courage and consistency, can genuinely challenge powerful systems, even when it seems impossible. His early life is proof that transformation, both personal and societal, often starts with an unwavering commitment to principle, even in the face of setbacks like Chauri Chaura.
That's a powerful takeaway. The idea that individual conviction, lived out, can have world-changing impact. Thank you again, and thank you all for joining us on Runner Stories for the Road, part of the MD Talk Health and Fitness channel. We hope you found this exploration valuable.
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.